Hey YouTube, it's Point Shooter here. Well, today I wanted to do a quick video for Iowndunoob, a good friend of mine, and he had messaged me about getting a first aid kit like one of these big boxes, the old military surplus boxes, and I wanted to show him a little bit about what I would put inside one of these kits and how I use it as a vehicle kit, or that you could use it as an in-home kit. So first of all, this is what rides in the vehicles. This is just one of the ones, and then the things that go with it would be a heavy-duty flashlight like the Streamlight SL20, and then two rescue tools, a window punch. This is just an automatic center punch, and then this is an old U.S. military shroud cutter, and it works great as a seatbelt cutter. I have this, and then we have other seatbelt cutters. The one that I really like is the Gerber style one, where it has the two blades, the two little razor blades in it. See, with this, yeah, it cuts, it's chisel ground, so basically you really want to have something that you're going to be able to use to cut a seatbelt without whipping out a knife and possibly harming someone. So you want to have something that's going to be able to cut and break a window. So let's dive into the kit. I always label the kits with the name of the vehicle and then the date. This one's been riding around a bit, so it's a little bit jumbled up, but let's see how intact it is. So there's a lot of gear in here. What we've got first off is the main pouch. This has your Kendall Telfa pads. These are 3x8s. Then it has smaller sterile pads, 3x3s, 2x2s. This is what you're going to be using to deal with minor injuries. There's a pouch that has all kinds of band-aids, and everything's labeled as to what's in there. There's moleskin in there. There's all different kinds of band-aids, different things like that. And then these are some basic medications. You've got Excedrin migraine, Tylenol, Aleve, aspirin, Motrin, antibiotic ointment pads, hand wipes, different things like that. So these are the different medications. There's also burn gel in there, anti-itch cream, all kinds of things. Generally, I prefer to use Tylenol in the field because with the other drugs, aspirin and things like that, they can actually cause bleeding. Some people can't even take those medications because they are susceptible to bleeding. So you want to avoid them in a situation where generally if I'm coming up on someone and they're asking for something for pain, I'd give them Tylenol personally. But there's a lot of different medications in there. So that's just the basics. There's just a lot of gauze. Basically, if somebody's cut, somebody's bleeding, and it's not something too severe, we just grab this, and this is what you would use for most things. So you've got the gauze pads, you've got the band-aids, everything to wrap up a minor injury. So next, very important thing would be nitrile gloves, non-latex gloves. You don't know who you're going to be dealing with, so I advise that you do not carry latex gloves in your kit unless you're only planning to work on yourself or family members. Yeah, you can run up to somebody and ask them if they have a latex allergy, but let me put it this way. If you're dealing with someone that you don't know who's consented to have you treat them, you don't want to complicate things by having them have a reaction to the latex. Stick with nitrile non-latex gloves. They're a little bit more expensive, sure, but trust me, it's worth it. I also like the colored ones because it just makes it easier to see, and it's very visible that you have gloves on. So I just choose the blue because that's what I have. Next would be steri strips. There's way more steri strips in here than there probably needs to be, but we had so many steri strips. We got a whole box of medical supplies from my grandmother, and I just stuck a whole thing of steri strips in here. There's various sizes. These are amazing. I had the other day, it's on the other hand that's holding the camera, but I had a nice cut right across the finger and was applying direct pressure to it, but it still was bleeding. Took a steri strip, two steri strips, and closed it right up. Instantly stopped the bleeding. Amazing steri strips. I swear by them. I EDC them. They're amazing. So next, getting into things a little bit more serious here, we got a pair of trauma shears. If you need to cut away clothing, something like that. I like to have the things that you're going to be needing to access right away, right in plain view. Iowndunoob and I were talking. These are the 6-inch emergency bandages by First Care. These are the best, hands down, for major trauma in my opinion. I've seen them used, never had to use them myself, thankfully, but they're great. I usually carry 2. This one only had room for 1, but I have more of the USGI bandages, which we'll show you in a minute. This is good for gunshot wounds, anything like that, a serious injury. So these are very good to have. Make sure you get the ones by First Care. Don't go on eBay. eBay, is my opinion, is the best place to get the bandages and a lot of first aid supplies. Do not go on there and search Israeli bandage If it's not by First Care, don't buy it. You're getting ripped off. They're not the real thing. So these are, in my opinion, these are the workhorses of the kit. These are just the camouflage field dressing bandages. These are from the 80s. I have an entire crate of these, an entire case I bought at the surplus store. I keep these everywhere. I've used them many, many times, and what it is, I actually got one out to show you guys. It's this. You have a pad here, a sterile pad, that you apply against the wound, and you have tails that you can use to wrap around the body. What you want to do is you don't want to tie it so tight that you're cutting off the blood flow. Think about it, it's not a tourniquet, but it's a way to have a bandage pad that's attached to the wound and you're able to put pressure on it. These are great. These are one of my first levels of defense, that if somebody has something that's really bleeding and you can't just use gauze pads on it, you need something to tie a dressing on. These are a one-stop shop. Yeah, you can take triangular bandages or you can take rolls of gauze and wrap stuff. You just pull the wrapper on this and out comes one of these bandages. I love them. You can't carry enough of them, in my opinion. They'll run you about $2 to $3 a piece, but you can usually get a pretty good deal if you buy them in bulk. Ask your local military surplus dealer if they can get a hold of them. That's what I did, and was able to get a whole crate of them. So those are great. This kit, as I said, has 5 of them. Really carry as many as you want. 5 is probably a good number for most situations. Maybe even a little bit overkill. But let me give you a little close-up here. Let's see, I'll annotate the NSN on them, but these have been replaced by these in the military. But these, I've seen them work. I've used them myself. They're great. Next, 2 triangular bandages. These are just some old ones that I have. These are nice because they have the list of the different things you can do with them. You can make slings with them, wraps with them. You could use them as a tourniquet if you have to. But what I prefer would be the NAR cat tourniquet. And you can see this one's from October. This is the red tip, which is the new and improved model, which has the time here. I always recommend that you have that. And along with it, have a marker. You always want to have some sort of writing tool in your kits, because if you have to take down information, what's nice is you could write right on the lid of this. If you had accident information, something like that, you didn't have anything to write on, you can write right on the kit lid, as long as you have a marker like this. If you're applying a tourniquet or anything like that, remember it's a last resort. You need to understand the risks before you use one, but you need to mark the time that it was applied. I apply it on the tourniquet, and I also write it on the person's head. So those are some very important things to have. Next, we'll get these out of the way. These are just 2 space blankets. These are just some cheapy ones, but you could be used if someone was going into shock. You want to always be thinking about shock management. So I always recommend in a kit like this you have some space blankets. I've got some sunscreen. That's just a comfort item. Next, this is tincture of iodine, 2%. That's an antiseptic that I use, as well as you can use it for disinfecting water. It's just a nice little antiseptic to have, just a small 1-ounce bottle. And then I also have for disinfecting a 2-ounce bottle of povidone iodine, which is a little bit different. This is similar, but it replaced tincture of iodine back in, I think it was in the 50s that they came up with this. And this is stuff that I use. This is just a 2-ounce bottle that I've relabeled for use. You always want to make sure that you have everything clearly marked if you're taking out of the original container. So this is a good, you can also disinfect water with this, but it takes about twice as many drops. I believe it's 10 drops per quart to use it to disinfect water. Medical tape, I prefer the Transpore by 3M, the paper tape. You can get the clear stuff, and I used the clear stuff for years, but I really like the paper stuff these days. This is, in my opinion, the best medical tape there is. I've got 2 rolls of Curlex here. These are just wrapped up in plastic bags. When we got them, they were out of the wrappers, so these are not sterile, but these can be used as a wrap of gauze. So these are nice to have. 2 Ace bandages. These are the old style. Someone had just commented on one of my videos that he preferred these as opposed to the cohesive bandages, which stick to themselves. I've actually been very fortunate and never really used either. So I don't have a lot of experience with them. Your mileage may vary, but you want to have something that's sort of elastic that you can use to apply compression. And also, if you're going to be using a splint, these make a great way to wrap. I also recommend a bottle of eye wash. This is a large bottle. It came with an eye cup, and I have the eye cup separately, but for most situations you're probably not going to be using the eye cup, but you can use this to flush out an eye if chemicals or something like that was in the eye. You could also use a smaller bottle. This is a 4-ounce bottle. You don't have to have something this big, but this is the size that I had. I've got a chem light in here. I always recommend a chem light because it's hands-free lighting. You can lay this down and you can use it also to signal vehicles. Remember, this is a vehicle kit, but it could also be used in the home. Power failures, whatever. If you need some light and you need it fast, this is a great way to do it. This is an albuterol inhaler. This is my personal one. You always want to make sure that you consider the bases. If you're an asthmatic, if you're a diabetic, you want to make sure that you have the medications and the different things that you need on hand. If you have allergies, you need to have that EpiPen. You need to make sure that if you have some sort of reaction out there in the field that you're ready to take care of it. Next, small roll of duct tape. This is just 100-mile-per-hour tape. It's nice if you need to secure things, and it also matches the color of the box, which I like. Quick Clot. He and I were talking a little bit about Quick Clot. I only have experience with Quick Clot. I've never tried Celox. Never actually used Quick Clot on a live person, but have seen it used. I think it's good stuff. Again, it is a last resort. It's like the tourniquet. This is something that you could use in a situation if you can't use a tourniquet. As I said, if you have a groin injury or something like that. But again, you need to remember that these are not, you don't just cut your thumb and stick this on there and think you're good to go. It's hard for the hospitals to clean these out. Because it's on the advanced clotting sponge, it's easier for them to clean out. But again, this is not something that you just stick on a paper cut. This is for serious life-threatening injuries. This is the large size, and then I also have one of the smaller packs. Sometimes I have more, depending on what the applications are. If this was a range bag, I might have more Quick Clot, but this is just a general purpose first aid kit. I also have, these are desiccant packs. These come in shoes and medications and all kinds of things, handbags, you know, whatever you're ordering, TVs, electronics, you can usually find these. We just have a huge jar of them, and I put them in all the first aid kits because they help to soak up the moisture. What you don't want to have is you don't want to have moisture accumulating in here and things get musty. You know, this kit stays sealed up most of the time. It is inspected various times throughout the year, but you want to make sure that you are keeping moisture down to a minimum. I've got an instant ice pack in here. This is actually a reusable one, but it's also one of the ones that you just snap and shake, and it becomes cold. Good if you need to ice down an injury. I also recommend a good flashlight. This is just a well-worn Phoenix LD20, but if you have some sort of good flashlight in there, I mean, it could be a mag light, it could be anything. As you guys saw, we already have a high-power flashlight in the car, like a Streamlight SL20, but you want to have a flashlight that's dedicated to the kit, in my opinion. And this can give you low mode, it can give you the high modes. Runs about 70 hours on low mode, so it gives you a lot of good lighting, and then you can get higher power if you need to. This is just personal choice that I put in here, but these are some foot warmers. Again, this could be a comfort item, or if you ran into a hypothermia situation, these are similar to the Blizzard heat blankets that the military uses, where they're a blanket that has heat pads attached to it. You wouldn't want to, I wouldn't put this right up against somebody's chest, but if someone had been in the water and you were worried about them becoming hypothermic, you could place this around them and help to warm them up until help arrived. Just a personal preference. Also, it's nice that if you were out somewhere and wanted to have a foot warmer, you'd have it. So those are those items. These are some of the instruments. Just a thermometer. A good thing to have. It's not going to break like a glass one. So a thermometer's nice. It's sort of a comfort item. You're probably not going to take somebody's temperature, but it's nice to have, so I threw it in. A pair of detail scissors. These are suture removal scissors. You would want to sterilize them for sure. That was the other thing I think I forgot to show you in the main kit, was there were a bunch of alcohol pads in there. You can use forceps as well. Sometimes you might have to remove a splinter. These aren't my favorite forceps, but I just dedicated them to this vehicle kit. Next would be a SAM splint. This is a really old one. This is one we've had for a long time. You can see it's pretty beat up, but it still works fine. With a SAM splint, you want to make sure you have tape and other things to wrap around it to secure it in place. And you also want to make sure that you have padding to against the skin. Yes, it's a foam, it's padded, but if you're going to be doing any sort of walking on it, you're probably going to want to have it padded in place. So I like to use things like the Curlex, the conforming gauze that you can fluff it up in there. You could use cotton balls, you could use newspaper, you could use anything really. But a SAM splint is definitely a good item to have. Next, now this is a distinction. A first aid kit is not a survival kit, in my opinion. But there are items in them that can be used for either function if you had to. I always, in every single first aid kit that I have, no matter how big or how small, I have a box of matches. These are just cheap strike-on box matches in a Ziploc bag, but in the event that you needed to start a fire or something like that, you could also use these to sterilize instruments. It's always nice to have a source of fire so that if you forget everything else but you have this kit, you still have things you can work with. And then there's also 4 micropure tablets in here. This is not so much for drinking water, but rather if you needed to mix up irrigation solution or something like that. Or again, if you were in an emergency situation and needed to disinfect some water. There's a couple different ways of disinfecting water in this kit, and I like having the tablets around. Also, because if you had someone who had an allergy to iodine, these are nice because they are the chlorine based. So that's another word of warning. If you're doing anything with iodine based, you need to make sure that the person, generally it's pregnant women and people with hypothyroid issues, but not everybody can deal with iodine. It's not something that you want to ingest a lot of. Supposedly it doesn't have very many adverse effects. Cody Lundin talked about that in his book, that it used to be used for entire towns' water supplies, that this was the main source of water purification back in the day before they went to chlorine. But again, I limit your use of it. I don't personally have a problem with it, so I use it myself as a topical antiseptic. But you can use alcohol, you could use any different kinds of things for surface disinfection. So that's pretty much everything in the kit. This is a big box. We actually have a bunch of these just sitting around, and I've set them up, some of them as survival kits, some of them as, like this one, a vehicle first aid kit. But you can see there's a lot of gear here. What other things would I think would be important in a kit like this? Really, I think I've got most of the bases covered. Generally, on a highway emergency, something like that, think about it. Paramedics are going to arrive. Again, if you're going to be dealing with first aid like this, you need to have a good understanding of first aid. Take a first aid course, become a paramedic, become EMT certified, something like that. You don't want to go and cause further injury to someone because you don't know what you're doing. So all the items here, in my opinion, are pretty self-explanatory. That most of them, like the Quick Clot, for example, has the directions for use right on there, and you can use it and see what you're doing. The SAM splint has basic instructions in here. Things like the tourniquet are more advanced, and you wouldn't want to just have somebody slap that on. You want to make sure that people know what they're doing. Another thing that's nice to have in here would be some basic first aid instructions. You could attach them to the lid, you could have a booklet. But again, if you aren't trained ahead of time, if you were just hit in a collision on the interstate and you're bleeding out, you don't want someone to have to read the first aid book to come help you out. It's very important that you prepare and practice with all the items, and that's why I have things like this bandage that's taken out, and this is one that I use for all of my teaching, that I show people how to apply this, and that you could apply it to a leg injury. You could apply it for any different kind of injury, and talk about my personal experience. See, a lot of places, they'll sell a first aid kit or tell you to buy this first aid kit or this, that, and the other. I've talked to people on YouTube about it, and a lot of times they may have experience, but the people buying the kit don't. And that's why it's very important that you understand each and every single component in your first aid kit before you venture out in the world with it. If you guys have questions about any individual components, feel free to message me. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. I hope this video helps you guys. And again, if you haven't checked out Iowndunoob, make sure you go to his channel. He is one of my longest time friends on YouTube here and has a great channel, puts out a lot of great information. So make sure you check him out and subscribe. Alright, take care guys. This is Point Shooter signing out.